The evening sky turned dark as heavy rain clouds gathered over the city. Mike wiped the sweat from his forehead as he punched out from his second job at the warehouse. His shoulders ached from lifting boxes all afternoon, but he couldn't afford to miss a shift. Not when the rent was due next week and his boys needed new school shoes. "Night, Mike," called his supervisor. "See you tomorrow?" "You bet," Mike answered with a tired smile. "Can't miss out on those overtime hours." He pulled his worn jacket tighter as he stepped out into the chilly evening air. The bus stop was a 10-minute walk away, and he'd have to hurry if he wanted to catch the 9:15 bus. Missing it would mean waiting another hour, and he had promised his boys he'd be home to tuck them in tonight. His neighbor Mrs. Chen couldn't stay past 10. The first drops of rain began to fall as Mike quickened his pace. By the time he reached the main road, it had turned into a proper downpour. He ducked under the awning of a closed bakery, wondering if he should just make a run for it. That's when he noticed them. Two small figures huddled together at the bus stop across the street. Even from a distance, Mike could tell they were young girls, maybe around the same age as his older son. They wore matching blue coats, their long hair damp from the rain as they clutched each other, looking up and down the empty street. Mike hesitated. It wasn't his business. He had his own problems, his own kids waiting at home. But something didn't feel right about those girls standing alone as night fell and the storm worsened. Before he could talk himself out of it, Mike jogged across the street, splashing through puddles. "Hey there," he called, keeping a respectful distance. "Are you two okay? Waiting for someone?" The girls looked at each other, then at him. They were identical twins, Mike realized. Pretty children with serious eyes that seemed older than their years. "We missed our bus," one of them said. "The last one to Pine Hills," Mike winced. Pine Hills was the fancy part of town, at least a 30-minute drive from here. "Last bus to Pine Hills left about 20 minutes ago. Next one isn't until tomorrow morning." "Oh no," said the second girl, her voice trembling slightly. "We tried calling Dad, but his phone is going straight to voicemail. And we don't know Mom's new number since she moved," added the first twin. Mike glanced at his watch. He was definitely going to miss his bus now. What about another family member? Or a friend you could call? The girls exchanged another look. "Our housekeeper might answer, but she's off today. Dad had a big meeting and told us to take the bus home from our music lesson." Mike ran a hand through his hair, feeling raindrops trickle down his neck. These were clearly well-off kids who'd wandered into the wrong part of town. Pine Hills families didn't usually send their children on public buses, but then again, not all wealthy folks were the same. And now these two young girls were stranded in one of the rougher neighborhoods as night approached. "Listen," he said finally. "My name's Mike. I live about 15 minutes from here with my two boys. You can come dry off at my place and keep trying to reach your dad. It's not much, but it's warm and safe until we can get hold of your parents." The twins looked uncertain, and Mike couldn't blame them. He pulled out his wallet and showed them the photo of his sons he kept there. "That's Tommy, he's 10, and that's Liam, he's 8. I'm just a dad who'd hoped someone would help my kids if they were stuck somewhere in the rain." One of the girls nodded slowly. "I'm Amy," she said. "This is my sister Lily, our dad is Robert. Nice to meet you both. Let's get out of this rain and we'll figure things out, okay?" The bus rumbled past as they started walking, and Mike pushed away thoughts of his warm bed and the early shift tomorrow. Some things were more important than sleep. As they walked, the twins stayed close together, occasionally whispering to each other. Mike kept a respectful distance but made sure to stay between them and the street. This wasn't a neighborhood for young girls to be wandering alone. "So, you had music lessons?" Mike asked, trying to make conversation. "Piano," said Lily. "We go every Thursday. Our teacher was sick last week," Amy added, "so we had a makeup lesson today." "That's nice. My Liam loves music too. Can't afford lessons, but his school has a program he joins during lunch sometimes." The girls nodded politely, and Mike felt a twinge of embarrassment. These kids probably had private teachers and grand pianos in their homes. His boys shared a bedroom with a second-hand keyboard Mike had found at a yard sale. They turned onto Mike's street, lined with apartment buildings that had seen better days. Paint peeled from the walls, and a few windows were patched with cardboard instead of glass. Mike saw the twins exchange a glance but was grateful when they said nothing. "Here we are," Mike said, stopping in front of a 5-story brick building. "Third floor. Elevator's been broken for months, so we'll have to take the stairs." The lobby smelled of cooking oil and damp concrete. Mike nodded at Mr. Patel, who was collecting his mail. Evening, Mike. Working late again? Yeah, the usual. These are my friend's daughters. Got caught in the rain waiting for their dad. Mr. Patel smiled at the girls. Nasty weather tonight. Good thing they found you. As they climbed the stairs, Mike could hear music thumping from someone's apartment, a baby crying behind another door. The twins stayed close behind him, their fancy shoes clicking on the concrete steps. When they reached the third floor, Mike could hear the television through his apartment door. He knocked twice, then used his key. Mrs. Chen? It's me. His elderly neighbor appeared in the hallway, her face lighting up with relief. About time. The boys have been asking when you'd be home. She noticed the twins standing behind Mike and raised her eyebrows. These girls missed their bus, Mike explained quietly. They're trying to reach their dad. I couldn't just leave them at the stop in this weather. Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly. Of course not. I made extra dumplings. Enough for everyone. You're a lifesaver, Mike said, meaning it. How are the boys today? Good boys, as always. Liam finished his math homework. Tommy helped with the dishes. She gathered her cardigan. I'll head home now. Call if you need anything. As Mrs. Chen left, two boys came running into the hallway. Dad, you're back. The younger one threw his arms around Mike's waist. Hey, buddy, Mike said, hugging him tight. Sorry I'm late. The older boy was staring at the twins. Who are they? This is Amy and Lily, Mike explained. They're going to stay with us until their dad can pick them up. Girls, these are my sons, Tommy and Liam. The four children sized each other up with the natural curiosity of young people. Mike ushered everyone into the small living room, feeling suddenly self-conscious about the worn couch, the mismatched chairs, the water stain on the ceiling from when the upstairs neighbor's bathroom had flooded. It's not much, he said, but it's home. Let's get you both dried off. Tommy, can you get some towels from the bathroom? While Tommy fetched towels, Mike showed the twins where they could hang their wet coats. The apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, and a living room that doubled as a dining area. The furniture was secondhand, the decorations sparse, but it was clean and warm. You can use our phone to try your dad again, Mike offered, pointing to the landline on the kitchen wall. Cell reception's terrible in this building. Amy tried the number while Lily dried her hair with a faded blue towel. After a moment, Amy shook her head. Still no answer. It went to voicemail. I left a message, she added. Told him we're safe and gave him this number. Mike nodded. Good. He's probably worried sick about you two. While we wait, how about some food? Mrs. Chen's dumplings are the best in the neighborhood. The boys were already setting the small kitchen table, adding 2 extra places without being asked. Mike felt a surge of pride watching them. They didn't have much, but they knew how to share what they had. As the rain continued to pour outside, the strange group sat down to eat together. The twins were quiet at first, but soon warmed up as Liam started telling them about his school's upcoming science fair. What's your project about? Lily asked, seeming genuinely interested. It's about how plants grow with different types of water, Liam explained, his eyes lighting up. Dad helped me set it up. Sounds cool, Amy said. We did one last year about electricity. As they ate, Mike noticed the twins glancing around the apartment, taking in the cramped space, the carefully mended curtains, the stack of bills on the counter. But there was no judgment in their eyes, just curiosity. The phone remained silent as they finished dinner, and Mike began to worry. Where was this father? How could he not be frantically searching for his daughters by now? You girls can take my bed tonight if your dad doesn't come soon, Mike said. I'll sleep on the couch. Oh, we couldn't, Lily protested. It's no trouble, Mike insisted. Let's get you settled and comfortable. Your dad will probably be here first thing in the morning. As he helped the boys get ready for bed and made up his room for the twins, Mike wondered about the father of these polite, well-mannered girls. What kind of man wouldn't be tearing the city apart looking for his children? Perhaps there was more to the story than he knew. What Mike couldn't possibly guess was that this act of simple kindness, taking in 2 strangers on a rainy night, was about to change his life in ways he could never imagine. Mike woke early the next morning, his back stiff from a night on the too small couch. For a moment he stared at the water stain on the ceiling, trying to remember why he wasn't in his bed. Then it all came flooding back. The twins at the bus stop, the unanswered phone calls, the worry in their eyes. He sat up quietly, listening for sounds in the apartment. The boys were still asleep in their room, but soft whispers came from his bedroom where the twins had spent the night. He checked his watch, 5:30 a.m. Too early to wake the children, but he needed to get ready for his morning shift at the convenience store. The phone hadn't rung all night. What kind of father didn't notice his daughter's missing? Mike shook away the thought. There had to be an explanation. He folded the thin blanket he'd used and tiptoed to the kitchen. The least he could do was make breakfast for everyone before heading out. Mrs. Chen would come at 7 to watch the boys, and she could keep an eye on the twins until their father showed up. As Mike cracked eggs into a bowl, he heard his bedroom door open. Amy appeared in the hallway, her long hair slightly tangled from sleep. "Good morning," she said politely. "Can I help with anything?" Mike smiled, surprised. "Morning. You don't need to help. I'm just making some eggs and toast before I head to work." "I don't mind," Amy insisted, coming into the tiny kitchen. "At home, we help our housekeeper with breakfast sometimes. I can make really good scrambled eggs." Mike hesitated, then handed her the whisk. "Sure, why not? There's cheese in the fridge if you want to add some." They worked side by side in comfortable silence. Mike couldn't help noticing how at ease Amy seemed, despite being in a stranger's home in a neighborhood far from her own. There was something grown up about her, as if she'd learned early that life didn't always go according to plan. "Your dad still hasn't called," Mike said gently. "Do you have any other numbers we could try? Your mom, maybe?" Amy's hand paused mid-whisk. "Mom's traveling in Europe with her new husband, Dad. He gets really busy with work sometimes. He probably thinks we're at home with the housekeeper." "Doesn't he check on you?" Amy shrugged, her eyes on the eggs. "He calls when he can. He's got this big business deal right now. He's been working late every night this week." Mike felt a surge of something. Not quite anger, but close to it. His boys never went to bed without him checking on them, no matter how exhausted he was from working double shifts. But he kept his expression neutral. It wasn't his place to judge. "Well, we'll keep trying his number. And I'll call Mrs. Chen to stay with you all until he answers or comes to get you." By 6:30, everyone was awake and seated around the small kitchen table. Lily had joined her sister in helping, setting the table with the mismatched plates and pouring juice into the plastic cups Mike kept for the boys. Tommy and Liam seemed delighted by the presence of the twins, showing them their school books and toys as they ate. "These eggs are really good," Liam declared, his mouth full. "Amy made them," Mike said, smiling at the girl. "She's a good cook." Lily made the toast, Amy added, nudging her sister. "It's just toast," Lily said, but she looked pleased. Mike watched the 4 children talking and laughing together. It was nice having more voices in the apartment. Since his wife had left 3 years ago, it had just been him and the boys getting by day to day. There wasn't much time for friends or visitors between his jobs and their schoolwork. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. Mrs. Chen was early. "I'll get it," Mike said, pushing back his chair, but when he opened the door, it wasn't his elderly neighbor standing there. Instead, a tall man in an expensive suit filled the doorway, his face pale with worry. Behind him stood a younger man holding a tablet, looking equally tense. "I'm looking for Amy and Lily," the man said without preamble. His voice was deep and authoritative. "The building manager said they might be here." Before Mike could answer, 2 blurs rushed past him. "Dad?" The twins cried in unison, throwing themselves at the man. The man knelt down, gathering both girls into a tight hug. "Thank God," he murmured into their hair. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Mike stood awkwardly in the doorway, relief mingling with a strange disappointment. The girls would go back to their life of housekeepers and private lessons, and his apartment would return to its quiet routine. The man stood up, still holding his daughter's hands. "I'm Robert Wilson," he said, extending his free hand to Mike. "I can't thank you enough for taking care of my girls." Mike shook the offered hand, noting the expensive watch on Robert's wrist, the perfectly tailored suit. Mike Sullivan. It was no trouble. "They're great kids." "Dad, this is Mr. Mike and his sons Tommy and Liam," Lily said, tugging on her father's sleeve. "They gave us dinner and let us stay in their room. And we had eggs for breakfast." Robert looked past Mike into the apartment, taking in the worn furniture, the cramped space, the boys watching curiously from the kitchen doorway. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise maybe, or realization. "Please, come in," Mike offered, stepping aside. "We were just finishing breakfast." Robert hesitated, then nodded. "Just for a minute. I need to get the girls home." As they entered the living room, Tommy and Liam stood shyly near the kitchen table. Robert nodded politely to them. "These are my boys," Mike said. "Tommy's 10 and Liam's 8. "Nice to meet you," Robert said, his voice gentler than before. "Thank you for sharing your home with my daughters." The younger man in the doorway cleared his throat. "Mr. Wilson, we should really get going. You have the conference call at 8. Robert waved him off. "Tell them I'll be late, David." He turned back to Mike. "What happened yesterday?" "The girls' piano teacher said they left on time, but they never made it home." Mike explained about finding the twins at the bus stop, how they'd missed the last bus to Pine Hills and couldn't reach their father. "We tried calling you lots of times," Amy said, looking up at her father, "but it kept going to voicemail." A flash of guilt crossed Robert's face. "I was in the secure boardroom all evening. No phones allowed during the merger talks." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up slightly. "I didn't check messages until after midnight. By then I was frantic." "We left you a message with this number," Lily pointed out. "Didn't you get it?" "I did early this morning. That's how I found you." Robert looked at Mike with newfound respect. "You took in 2 strangers, Mr. Sullivan. Not many people would do that." Mike shrugged, embarrassed. "Couldn't leave them out in that storm. And please, call me Mike." Robert nodded, looking around the apartment again. His eyes lingered on the stack of bills on the counter, the patched curtains, the shoes by the door that were clearly worn at the heels. "Do you live here alone with your sons?" he asked. "Yeah, it's just us. Their mom left a few years back." Mike hadn't meant to share that, but something about Robert's direct gaze made it hard to be anything but honest. "And you work?" "2 jobs. Convenience store in the mornings, warehouse in the afternoons. Mrs. Chen from next door watches the boys when I'm not home." Robert nodded slowly, as if putting pieces together. "That must be challenging." Mike felt his defenses rise. He didn't want this wealthy man's pity. "We manage. The boys are doing great in school and we have everything we need." "Dad," Lily interrupted, tugging at her father's sleeve again. "Can we show you something?" Robert allowed himself to be pulled toward the boys' bedroom, where the twins had slept the night before. Mike followed, curious. "Look," Amy said, pointing to a small desk crammed into the corner. "Tommy won the science prize at school. And Liam plays keyboard." The desk was cluttered with school books, but prominently displayed was a small trophy. Tommy's prize for the science fair last year, and a stack of sheet music for the second-hand keyboard Mike had found at a yard sale. "Tommy's really smart," Lily continued. "He helped me understand the math homework I had in my backpack, and Liam played music for us before bed." Robert examined the trophy, then glanced at the keyboard. It was a basic model, nothing like the grand piano his daughters practiced on daily. But it had been one of Mike's proudest purchases, bought with overtime money and presented to Liam on his 7th birthday. "You play?" Robert asked Liam, who had followed them into the room. The boy nodded shyly. "I like music. The school lets me practice at lunch sometimes." "He's teaching himself," Mike explained. "Can't afford lessons, but he's got a good ear." Robert looked thoughtful. He turned back to Mike. "I'd like to repay you for taking care of my girls." Mike shook his head immediately. "That's not necessary. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Robert said firmly. "They wouldn't, and we both know it." He reached for his wallet. "Please, let me—" "No," Mike interrupted, his voice sharper than intended. The boys were watching, and he didn't want them to see him take money from this man. "Really, Mr. Wilson, we're fine." An awkward silence fell over the room. Then David appeared in the doorway. "Sir, it's nearly 7:30. Robert nodded, but he was still looking at Mike with an odd expression. "Girls, get your things. We need to go." As the twins gathered their belongings, Robert stepped closer to Mike. "I meant no offense," he said quietly. "I respect your pride. But I won't forget what you did for my daughters." Mike nodded, relaxing slightly. "They're good kids. You should be proud. I am." Robert hesitated. "Look, would you give me your phone number?" "In case I need to." "Thank you properly later," Mike raised. 3 days passed and life returned to its familiar rhythm for Mike and his boys. The twins' visit became a story they talked about at dinner. The girls from Pine Hills who had stayed the night. Tommy wondered if they'd ever see them again. Mike gently suggested they probably wouldn't. Different worlds rarely collided twice. Thursday morning dawned gray and cold. Mike's alarm went off at 4:30 a.m. as usual, and he dragged himself out of bed for his early shift at the convenience store. His back ached from lifting heavy boxes at the warehouse the night before, but he pushed the pain aside. The rent was due next week, and Tommy needed new winter boots. No time for rest. The store was quiet at 5 in the morning, just a few night shift workers stopping for coffee and the occasional truck driver buying cigarettes. Mike stocked shelves, mopped floors, and tried not to think about how tired he was already. With a full warehouse shift still ahead of him, at 9, just as Mike was preparing to end his shift, the bell above the door jingled. He looked up from the register to see a familiar face, the young man who had accompanied Robert Wilson when he came to collect his daughters. David, right? Mike said, surprised. The man nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable in his expensive suit and cashmere coat. He seemed out of place among the cheap snacks and lottery tickets. Mr. Sullivan, David said formally, I'm glad I caught you. Mr. Wilson would like to speak with you. Mike raised his eyebrows. With me? What about? He didn't specify, but he was quite insistent. David glanced at his watch. His car is outside. He'd like to take you to breakfast if you have time. Mike hesitated. His shift was ending, but he'd planned to go home and sleep for a few hours before the warehouse job. Still, curiosity got the better of him. Let me tell my manager I'm leaving. 5 minutes later, Mike found himself sitting in the back of a luxury car that probably cost more than he'd earn in 5 years. Robert Wilson sat across from him, looking even more polished than he had at Mike's apartment in a dark suit that screamed money and power. Thank you for joining me, Robert said, offering his hand. I hope I'm not interrupting your day. Mike shook his hand, acutely aware of his convenience store uniform and the coffee stain on his sleeve. My shift just ended, but I'm a bit surprised to see you. The car moved smoothly through morning traffic heading toward downtown. Robert studied Mike with the same thoughtful expression he'd worn in the apartment. I wanted to thank you properly for what you did for my daughters, he said finally. They haven't stopped talking about you and your boys. Mike shifted uncomfortably. Like I said, anyone would have done the same. No, Robert said firmly. They wouldn't. I've been thinking about that a lot these past few days. He paused, looking out the window. Most people in this city would have walked right past 2 kids at a bus stop. Or worse. The car pulled up outside an upscale restaurant with a doorman and tinted windows. Mike had passed it many times but never imagined going inside. I thought we could talk over breakfast, Robert explained, gesturing toward the restaurant. Unless you have somewhere to be? Mike thought of his empty apartment, the few hours of sleep he'd miss, and shrugged. Lead the way. Inside, the restaurant was all polished wood and crisp white tablecloths. A host greeted Robert by name and led them to a corner table, away from the other diners. Mike felt painfully out of place in his work uniform, but Robert seemed oblivious to the curious glances they received. After they ordered coffee and eggs for Mike, a complicated breakfast bowl for Robert, an awkward silence fell between them. What did a wealthy businessman and a struggling single dad have to talk about, beyond a chance encounter and a night of shelter? Your daughters are doing okay? Mike asked finally. Robert nodded. They're fine. A bit shaken by the experience, but more excited than anything. It was an adventure for them. He smiled slightly. They're very sheltered normally. Private school, playdates arranged weeks in advance, that sort of thing. They seemed like good kids, polite, helpful. Yes, they are. Robert's expression softened. Their mother and I divorced 4 years ago. She remarried last year, a French businessman. Lives in Paris now. The girls see her during school holidays. Mike nodded, understanding the unspoken connection. 2 single fathers, though with vastly different resources. Must be hard raising twin girls on your own, Mike offered. Robert laughed without humor. I have help. A housekeeper, a driver, their school. I'm not exactly doing it alone, not the way you are. He leaned forward. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. The waiter arrived with their food, interrupting the conversation. When they were alone again, Mike looked at Robert expectantly. I did some research on you, Mike, Robert said, cutting straight to the point. Hope you don't mind. Mike froze, fork halfway to his mouth. Research? Nothing intrusive. Just asking around. You've worked at that convenience store for 3 years. The warehouse for 2. Before that, you were at the auto factory until it closed. Your wife left shortly after, leaving you with the boys. Robert took a sip of his coffee. You work approximately 60 hours a week between your 2 jobs, yet you still make time to volunteer at your son's school when they have events. You haven't missed a parent-teacher conference in 3 years. Mike set down his fork, appetite gone. Why would you look into my life like that? Because I was impressed, Robert said simply. And intrigued. You have every reason to be bitter, to give up. Instead, you work yourself to exhaustion to give your boys a decent life. And when you found 2 lost children, you didn't hesitate to help them, even though you have barely enough for your own family. Mike shifted uncomfortably. It's called being a decent human being. Nothing special about that. But it is special, Robert insisted. Especially in my world. He set down his coffee cup. Let me tell you a bit about myself, Mike. I grew up in a neighborhood not unlike yours. My father worked 2 jobs as well. Janitor during the day, security guard at night. My mother cleaned houses. We didn't have much, but they made sure I had what I needed. When I got a scholarship to college, it changed everything. Mike listened, surprised by this revelation. Nothing about Robert Wilson suggested humble beginnings. I built my company from nothing, Robert continued. Started in my dorm room, grew it into what it is today. Now I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. A shadow crossed his face, but somewhere along the way I lost touch with what matters. My marriage failed. I barely see my daughters, even though we live in the same house. I'm surrounded by people who want something from me, who only see my wallet, not the person. That sounds lonely, Mike said quietly. It is. Robert met his eyes. When the girls told me how you treated them, not as charity cases, not as an inconvenience, just as kids who needed help, it reminded me of my parents, of the values I grew up with but somehow forgot. Mike didn't know what to say to that. He took a bite of his eggs, giving himself time to think. I have a proposition for you, Robert said suddenly. Mike looked up, wary. What kind of proposition? I need someone like you at my company. Someone with integrity, who knows the value of hard work. Someone my employees and clients can trust. Robert leaned forward. I want to offer you a job, Mike. Mike nearly choked on his coffee. A job doing what? I don't have a college degree. I've worked blue-collar jobs my whole life. As my personal assistant, Robert said calmly. You'd manage my schedule, attend meetings with me, be my right hand. I need someone who'll tell me the truth, not just what I want to hear. Someone who reminds me where I came from. Mike stared at him, speechless. Robert continued. The salary would be 3 times what you make now, combined. Full benefits, of course. College funds for your boys. And hours that would let you be home for dinner with them every night. It sounded too good to be true. Mike found his voice. Why me? There must be thousands of qualified people who'd want that job. Qualified on paper, sure, but not qualified here. Robert tapped his chest. I don't need another yes man, Mike. I need someone real. Mike's mind raced. A job like that would change everything for him and the boys. No more choosing between paying the electric bill and buying school supplies. No more coming home too exhausted to help with homework. No more missing soccer games because of overtime shifts. But it also sounded terrifying. What did he know about the corporate world? About wealth and power and boardrooms? I don't know the first thing about being anyone's assistant, Mike admitted. I might not be what you're looking for. You know how to be organized. You manage 2 jobs and 2 kids. You know how to be discreet. You took in my daughters without making a fuss or expecting anything in return. And you know how to be honest. You're doing it right now instead of jumping at the offer. Robert smiled. The rest you can learn. The waiter appeared to refill their coffee cups. Mike used the interruption to gather his thoughts. When they were alone again, he looked Robert in the eye. Why are you really doing this? Is it just because I helped your daughters? Robert considered the question. Partly yes. But it's more than that. Meeting you and seeing how you live, how you raise your boys despite the challenges, it was like looking into a mirror from 20 years ago. At the life my parents lived. He paused. I've been successful beyond my wildest dreams, but I've lost something important along the way. Working with someone like you might irritate. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of Tommy's pencil scratching against paper as he worked on his math homework. Mike sat at the kitchen table, Robert Wilson's business card in his hand, turning it over and over as he had been doing for the past 2 days. Dad, you okay? Liam asked, looking up from the keyboard he was practicing on. You keep staring at that card. Mike smiled at his younger son. Just thinking, buddy. How's the new song coming? Good, want to hear? Without waiting for an answer, Liam launched into a simple melody he'd been working on all week. Mike listened, pride swelling in his chest. Despite everything, The tight budget, the lack of formal lessons. Liam had taught himself to play beautifully. And Tommy was top of his class in science, building experiments from household items and library books because Mike couldn't afford the fancy kits other kids had. His boys were thriving against the odds. Did he really want to change their lives so dramatically? The job offer from Robert Wilson would mean leaving behind everything familiar. Their neighborhood, the boys' school, their small but comfortable routine. It would mean entering a world Mike knew nothing about, corporate offices, business meetings, wealth and privilege. But it would also mean financial security, better opportunities for the boys, and more time together as a family. That sounds great, Liam, Mike said as his son finished playing. You've really got a talent, Liam beamed. Ms. Parker at school says I should take real lessons someday. Mike nodded, a familiar pang in his chest. So many some days he couldn't promise, but maybe now? Hey guys, he said suddenly, making up his mind. Let's have a family meeting. Tommy looked up from his homework and Liam turned on his stool. Family meetings were rare and usually meant something important. What's up, Dad? Tommy asked, closing his textbook. Mike took a deep breath. I've been offered a new job. The boys exchanged glances. Are you going to quit the store? Liam asked. And the warehouse? Tommy added. That's the plan. This would be just one job with better pay and better hours. I'd be home for dinner every night. No more Mrs. Chen after school. The boy's eyes widened. Really? Tommy said, clearly trying to process this. What kind of job? Mike hesitated, trying to find the right words. Remember those twin girls who stayed with us the other night? Their dad, Mr. Wilson, runs a big company downtown. He wants me to work as his assistant. Like a secretary? Liam asked, scrunching his nose. Mike laughed. More like a right-hand man. I'd help him manage his schedule, go to meetings with him, that sort of thing. But you don't know how to do that stuff, Tommy pointed out bluntly. You've always worked at stores and factories. Leave it to his practical eldest to cut right to the heart of the matter. You're right, I don't, but Mr. Wilson thinks I can learn. And the important part is he wants someone honest and hardworking, which he thinks I am. You are, Liam said loyally. Why does he want you? Tommy asked, still skeptical. Is it just because you helped his daughters? Mike considered the question. His sons deserved an honest answer. Partly, yes. But it's more than that. Mr. Wilson grew up like us, not a lot of money, parents working hard to make ends meet. He thinks I can help him remember what's important. The boys digested this information. Would we have more money? Tommy asked finally. Could I get that science kit for the science fair? And piano lessons? Liam added hopefully. Mike nodded. We'd have more money. We might even be able to move to a bigger apartment closer to my new job. Move? Tommy's face fell. But what about school? And my friends? And there it was, the downside. The boys had stability here, friends, teachers who knew them. Moving would mean starting over. That's why I wanted to talk to you guys, Mike said. This is a big decision and it affects all of us. I want to know what you think. The boys exchanged glances, having one of those silent conversations that siblings sometimes have. Will we still see Mrs. Chen? Liam asked. We can visit her, Mike promised. Would you be happier, Dad? Tommy asked unexpectedly. Mike looked at his son, surprised by the question. What do you mean? You're always so tired, Tommy explained. When you come home from the warehouse, sometimes you fall asleep on the couch before dinner, and you never have days off to just have fun. Mike felt a lump in his throat. He hadn't realized his exhaustion was so visible to his sons. I might be less tired, he admitted, and we could do more things together. The boys looked at each other again. Then Tommy nodded, making a decision. I think you should take the job, Dad. Me too, Liam chimed in. I want you to be home more. Mike felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Are you sure? It might mean changing schools, making new friends. Tommy shrugged. We can make new friends. And maybe the new school will have a better science program. And a music room, Liam added excitedly. Mike smiled, wondering when his boys had become so mature, so able to see the bigger picture. Okay then. I'll call Mr. Wilson tomorrow and tell him I accept. The rest of the evening was filled with excited speculation. Where would they live? What would Mike wear to an office job? Would the twins come visit them? As Mike tucked the boys into bed later, he felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Was he making the right choice? Could he really succeed in the corporate world after years of blue-collar work? Dad? Liam said sleepily as Mike turned out the light. I'm glad you helped those girls. Me too, buddy, Mike said softly. Me too. The next morning, Mike called the number on Robert's card from the payphone outside the convenience store. His hands were sweaty, his heart racing as if he were asking someone on a date rather than accepting a job offer. Wilson, came the crisp answer. Mr. Wilson, it's Mike Sullivan. Mike, good to hear from you. Have you thought about my offer? Mike took a deep breath. I have. And I'd like to accept if it's still on the table. There was a pause, then Robert's voice came back, warmer now. Excellent. When can you start? I need to give notice at my jobs. 2 weeks at most. Perfect. David will contact you with the details, paperwork, start date, that sort of thing. Robert paused. I'm glad you said yes, Mike. I think this will be good for both of us. As Mike hung up, he felt as if he were standing on the edge of a cliff, about to leap into the unknown. But for the first time in years, that unknown didn't look scary. It looked full of possibility. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind. Mike gave notice at both jobs, explaining that he'd found a better opportunity. His co-workers were surprised but happy for him, though a few seemed skeptical when he mentioned working downtown in an office. You sure about this, Mike? His supervisor at the warehouse asked. Office work is a whole different world. I'm sure, Mike said, with more confidence than he felt. It's a chance I can't pass up. Meanwhile, David called with details about the job. The salary was even better than Robert had initially mentioned, with benefits that made Mike's head spin. Health insurance that would actually cover everything, a retirement plan, paid vacation, a concept so foreign to Mike that he had to ask David to explain it. You'll get 3 weeks of paid time off per year, David said patiently. That means you can take time off work and you still get paid. 3 weeks? Mike couldn't imagine having that much time off. That's standard for executive assistants at Wilson Enterprises, David explained. Mr. Wilson takes his holidays seriously. Then came apartment hunting. With his new salary, Mike could afford something much nicer than their current place. David helped, sending listings for units in good neighborhoods with strong schools nearby. Mr. Wilson suggested this area, David said, pointing to a quiet neighborhood not too far from downtown. The elementary school has an excellent music program and the middle school is known for sciences. Mike raised an eyebrow. He researched schools for my kids? David smiled slightly. Mr. Wilson is thorough. And he mentioned that your sons have particular interests. They found a 3-bedroom apartment in a well-maintained building, with a small park across the street. It was clean and modern, with large windows and a kitchen that made Mike's current one look like a closet. The rent was more than double what Mike paid now, but still comfortably within his new budget. The boys will have their own rooms, he marveled, walking through the space with the building manager. And you'll be just 20 minutes from the office by bus, the manager added. There's a stop right outside. Mike signed the lease that day, a surreal feeling washing over him as he wrote the check for the security deposit. 2 weeks ago, such an amount would have cleaned out his savings. Now it was just a fraction of his first month's salary. Packing up their old apartment was bittersweet. They didn't have much, but each item had a memory attached. The coffee table Mike had found on the street and refinished himself. The kitchen chairs he'd bought one by one as he could afford them. The bookshelf he'd built for the boys' school books. We're taking it all, he told the boys when they asked if they'd need to leave things behind. It may not be fancy, but it's ours, Mrs. Chen cried when they told her they were moving. Who will I make dumplings for now? She asked, dabbing at her eyes. We'll visit, Mike promised, and you'll have to come see our new place. The day before they were set to move, a package arrived at their door. Inside was a brand new suit, crisp white shirts and polished shoes, all in Mike's size. For your first day, the note read, in Robert's handwriting. The car will pick you up at 7:30 Monday morning. 6 months had passed since Mike had accepted Robert Wilson's job offer, and sometimes he still couldn't believe the turn his life had taken. This morning, as he stood in the kitchen of their apartment making breakfast, he paused to take it all in. Sunlight streamed through windows much larger than their old apartment had. The boys' backpacks sat by the door, ready for school, Tommy's filled with advanced science homework, Liam's with sheet music for his piano lessons. The sound of a door opening made Mike turn. Tommy emerged from his room, hair still rumpled from sleep but already dressed in his school uniform. Morning, Dad, he yawned, sliding onto one of the kitchen stools. Pancakes? Your favorite, Mike confirmed, flipping one onto a plate. Big day today, right? Science fair presentations? Tommy nodded, suddenly looking nervous. Do you really think you can come? I know you said you would, but if Mr. Wilson needs you, I'll be there, Mike promised. Robert knows it's important. He actually moved a meeting so I could leave early. 6 months ago, Mike would never have imagined calling his boss by his first name, let alone having a boss who rearranged meetings around his family needs. But that was exactly the kind of relationship he'd developed with Robert Wilson. The first day on the job had been terrifying. Mike had arrived at the Wilson Enterprises building downtown, a gleaming tower of glass and steel, feeling like an imposter in his new suit. The security guard had given him a visitor's badge and directed him to the top floor, where Robert's office took up half the space. You must be Mike. The receptionist had greeted him warmly. Mr. Wilson is expecting you. Follow me. She'd led him through an open office area where dozens of people worked at sleek desks, past conference rooms with glass walls, to a large corner office with a view of the entire city. Robert had been standing at the window on the phone, but he'd hung up immediately when Mike entered. Mike, welcome to Wilson Enterprises. He'd shaken Mike's hand firmly. Ready for your first day? And somehow, despite all the doubts and fears, Mike had been ready. The job was challenging, certainly. He had to learn the corporate structure, understand Robert's business interests, manage a complex calendar, and interact with people who had Ivy League degrees and family connections. But he brought something valuable to the table too. A straightforward approach, a strong work ethic, and an ability to see through the politics and pretense that often clouded business decisions. Dad, can I have more orange juice? Liam's voice pulled Mike back to the present. His younger son had joined them at the counter, already dressed for school, his hair neatly combed. Sure, buddy. Mike refilled his glass, noting how much more confident Liam seemed these days. The piano lessons were paying off. His teacher said he had real talent, and for the first time, Liam was channeling his natural energy into something that truly engaged him. Both boys were thriving in their new school. Tommy had quickly distinguished himself in science and math, while Liam had found his place in the music program. They'd made new friends, joined after-school activities, and adapted to the changes with a resilience that made Mike proud. As for Mike himself, the transition had been more complex, but equally positive. Working as Robert's personal assistant meant being involved in every aspect of his business and often his personal life as well. Mike attended meetings with executives and investors, traveled with Robert to business conferences, and gradually became an essential part of the Wilson Enterprises operation. What had surprised Mike most was how much Robert valued his input. You see things differently, Robert had told him once after Mike pointed out a flaw in a marketing strategy that everyone else had missed. You're not caught up in how things have always been done. It's refreshing. As the boys finished breakfast and grabbed their backpacks, Mike checked his watch. The bus will be here in 5 minutes. Don't forget Tommy's science fair is at 2, Liam. I'll pick you up after school so we can both go. I remember, Liam said, giving his dad a quick hug before heading to the door. See you later. Tommy followed, pausing at the door. Thanks, Dad, he said quietly. For coming today. Mike felt his heart swell. Wouldn't miss it for the world. After the boys left, Mike finished getting ready for work. The car would arrive in 20 minutes to take him to the office, another perk of his new job that still felt strange. No more long bus rides or rushing between shifts. No more coming home too exhausted to help with homework or play a game with the boys. His phone rang as he was putting on his tie, a skill he'd had to learn for the job. Morning, Robert? He answered, seeing his boss's name on the screen. Mike, good morning. Just wanted to confirm you're still able to join the conference call with Tokyo at noon. I know it's Tommy's science fair day. Yes, I can do the call. It should be done by 1 and the science fair doesn't start until 2. Perfect. And David will have the car ready for you at 1:30. Robert paused. How's Tommy feeling about his presentation? The question warmed Mike. In the 6 months they'd worked together, Robert had shown a genuine interest in Mike's sons, often asking about their activities and achievements. Nervous, but excited. He's been working on this project for weeks. I'm sure he'll do great. The boys inherited their father's intelligence and determination. Mike smiled at the compliment. Thanks, Robert. See you at the office. As he hung up, Mike thought about how his relationship with Robert had evolved from employer-employee to something closer to friendship. They came from such different worlds, but they'd found common ground in their experiences as single fathers, in their work ethic, and in their shared values. The car arrived precisely on time, a sleek black sedan driven by Dave, Robert's regular driver who had become a familiar face in Mike's new life. "Morning, Mike," Dave greeted him. "Ready for another day at the top?" Mike laughed at their running joke. "As ready as I'll ever be." The drive to Wilson Enterprises took exactly 17 minutes in morning traffic. As they approached the gleaming tower, Mike no longer felt like an imposter. He belonged here now, had earned his place through hard work and integrity. The morning passed in a blur of meetings, calls, and emails. At noon, Mike joined Robert in the main conference room for the video call with potential investors in Tokyo. These calls had been intimidating at first, business people speaking different languages, discussing millions of dollars as casually as Mike used to discuss the weekly grocery budget. But now he participated actively, taking notes, occasionally offering insights that Robert always listened to carefully. When the call ended successfully, the Tokyo investors agreeing to move forward with a major project, Robert clapped Mike on the shoulder. "Another deal closed. You're bringing me luck, Mike." "Just doing my job," Mike responded, but he felt a sense of pride. In these 6 months, he'd been part of negotiations worth more money than he could have imagined in his previous life. "You're doing far more than that," Robert said seriously. "Now you'd better get going. Can't keep Tommy waiting on his big day. You remember it's the science fair today?" Robert smiled. "Of course. It's in my calendar. Tommy's science fair. 2 p.m. Just like Lily's dance recital next week and Amy's debate tournament the week after." Mike nodded, touched that Robert kept track of not just his daughter's activities, but Mike's son's as well. "I've been meaning to ask you," Robert added, walking with Mike toward the elevator. "The girls have been asking when Tommy and Liam can visit again. Maybe this weekend? We could have a barbecue by the pool if the weather holds." Since Mike had started working for Robert, the boys had visited the Wilson home several times, playing with the twins and exploring the enormous house and grounds. What had begun as awkward playdates, the boys overwhelmed by the luxury, the twins curious about these children from a different world, had evolved into genuine friendship. "They'd love that," Mike said. "I'll tell them tonight." As promised, Dave was waiting with the car at 1:30. They picked up Liam from school, then headed to the convention center where the science fair was being held. Tommy was already there, setting up his project, a complex experiment on renewable energy sources that he'd spent months perfecting. "Dad." "Liam!" Tommy waved excitedly when he spotted them. "Come see. It's all working perfectly." Mike and Liam hurried over to Tommy's table, where a miniature solar panel was powering a small motor. Charts and graphs covered the display board, showing data Tommy had meticulously collected. "This is amazing, buddy," Mike said, examining the setup. "You did all this yourself?" Tommy beamed. "Mr. Wilson helped me get some of the materials. He ordered them from a special science supply store." Mike made a mental note to thank Robert. The man was constantly finding ways to support the boys' interest without making a big show of it. Ordering supplies for Tommy's projects, finding a top piano teacher for Liam, quietly making opportunities available without undermining Mike's authority as a father. The science fair was a success. Tommy's project won first place in his age group, earning him a blue ribbon and a gift card to the science store. As they walked back to the car afterward, Tommy clutching his prize and talking excitedly about the next project he wanted to start, Mike felt a wave of gratitude for how far they'd come. "Dad?" Liam tugged at his sleeve as they reached the car. "Who's that?" Mike looked up to see a familiar black SUV parked next to their car. The window rolled down to reveal Robert and